I rise today to urge my colleagues to join me in voting yes on Senate Bill 173. There is a lot to celebrate in this budget. Historic funding increases for pre-K through 12 schools, community colleges, higher education investments in Michigan students at every level of their education journey. But as someone who grew up in rural northern Michigan, there is one investment I want to highlight specifically. An investment that supports rural school children across Michigan, including in my district, the 103 in Leelanau, Benzie, and Grand Traverse counties. What some may not stop to think about is that many rural school districts serve geographic areas of hundreds of square miles. To paint a picture, a school district like Benzie Central in northern Michigan drives the equivalent of a one-way trip from northern Michigan to San Francisco in a single day with their bus route. Traverse City Area Public School makes more than 3,000 stops each school day, driving over 7,000 miles, again, in a single day. Many rural school districts spend as much as 10 to 12% of their general fund budget just to get children to and from school. This is a significant cost even before these children step foot into their classrooms. And more miles traveled means huge wear and tear on buses, which must be replaced more frequently. More miles traveled means extremely high fuel costs for these districts. But for decades, state funding didn't account for that additional cost, despite rural districts' pleas my entire childhood and adult life. This has meant that these schools in rural districts had less money for the kids in their classrooms because so much of that money had to cover increased transportation costs in these large geographic districts. This has had real consequences for rural school children. Less money for classroom supports, less money to pay their teachers, less money for mental health FTEs, and more. I promised my community that coming to Lansing, I would fiercely champion rural northern Michigan issues. And again, as someone who grew up in rural northern Michigan in a community that literally shut down early the year I graduated high school because it ran out of money, and then opened the next year with no money for busing at all, Kalkaska County, is deeply meaningful to me to stand here today and ask for support for this budget. This issue means a lot to me. In fact, means so much it was the focus of my very first standalone policy bill of my first term as a state representative, proposing equity for rural transportation funding. And I am so grateful to our school aid fund appropriations chair in the House and the Senate, both, I might note, former public educators, and to our House and Senate leadership for finally that we are in leadership, listening to rural Michigan and saying yes to more equity for rural school districts. I am deeply proud that today this budget prioritizes rural Michigan kids and communities and includes funding to help rural districts invest more in the classroom, more into kids' learning, more into mental health supports, and the other critically needed resources for rural students. There's more to do, but this budget takes a significant step at long last in addressing rural transportation equity. Madam Speaker, I'm urging my colleagues to join me in voting yes for this budget. Vote yes for all of the ways that this budget addresses the needs of Michigan school children across the state. When we invest in school children, no matter their zip code, we all win. Thank you, Madam Speaker.